Welcome to this podcast of Center of Leafs Nation. This is your host, Pat LaRusso, with my co-host, Anthony Sino. We are lucky to have two of our regular guests back on. Always a pleasure having them. From the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan podcast, we have Mike Wilson and Rick Vaive. Welcome, gentlemen, back to the podcast.
Thanks,
hey, great. Thanks for having us there, Pat and Anthony.
It's been a pretty crazy run for the Leafs since the trade deadline. So I guess one of the major storylines, Rick, is Auston, meeting your goals in a single season and then surpassing it. As a fan, it was a very surreal moment because, in Leafs Nation, there hasn't been a lot of things for us to celebrate lately. So to kind of see that happen was kind of a real surreal moment as a fan. Would love to get your thoughts on what that moment was like and what it was like to go down and actually speak to Auston after.
Well, it was pretty cool. I mean, 40 years is a long time to hold a record. And, sooner or later, it's going to happen where someone's going to break it. And, I mean, it may as well be a generational type player like him, who's, he probably would have 350 goal seasons in a row if not for the pandemic. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's great for the organization. It's great for Auston. And getting to go down and see him and congratulate him and everything, it was pretty damn cool. And I sat with him. That was Saturday morning. Then Monday at the practice rink, sat and had lunch with him for a little bit, and it was cool. It was like 15 minutes of him and I just shooting the shit and talking about different things, not even hockey that much. And so that was pretty cool.
And Mike, what were your thoughts when you saw the moment? I think you were down there. Didn't you do that road trip?
Well, I was actually in Florida at the time watching it, so I saw it. But I watched the game that was in Dallas and they broke it. I was here for the 3 they scored against in Tampa to tie it. So, yeah, it's an emotional moment because I remember when Rick broke the record, when he said it, actually broke through 50 goals. And watching that, it was very, let's just say, I was feeling for my friend that, his record was going to be broken. But on the other hand, I think it was a good moment for Maple Leafs. I think the Maple Leafs themselves did a terrific job. I think that Rick will back this up, that the Leafs have been accused in the past of not recognizing their past. And I think in this instance, they did a tremendous job recognizing what Rick did, recognizing Auston's accomplishment, and really made it a memorable moment for a generation of Leaf fans that really they heard of Rick, but they don't really know who he is and what he's doing. And that's a shame they don't know these type of things.
Well, it was funny that you say that, Mike, because that Monday when they invited me to the practice rink. So I watched practice with Kyle, but we were standing up top watching practice. And then I went into before practice, I went in and met with the coaches and everything. And then we went into the film room, which is basically a theater.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there with the guys and they're, Sheldon's going over all the stuff that he wanted to relay to them and everything. And he goes, "Oh, and we have a special guest today. So let's roll the film." And then they showed a whole bunch of my goals and everything. And, and then they said 54 goals, 200 and some minutes and penalties. And then I heard a couple of guys go, "Holy shit." And I was like, "Yeah, that's true. I guess back then it was a lot different than it is now. The guys that are putting goals up aren't getting as many penalty minutes, but I can tell you right now, when I was playing, probably half our team had over 100 minutes in penalties. So that was a pretty cool moment for me anyway. Some of these guys on the team probably never even saw me play or, knew who I was really. And then all of a sudden your name's being, out there for a whole week. And then getting to meet some of those young guys was a pretty cool experience.
Their parents never saw you play, Squid. Never mind the kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy now, Mike.
Hey, I'm older than you are, so I got you by a couple of years. All right, so it's the same shot against both of us.
So I guess as a follow-up, Rick, and to Mike, maybe you can even answer this as well, just through your contact, through some of the other Leafs alumni that you guys have spoken to. I know the Toronto Star did a really excellent article about Rick and where your standing was in the Leafs organization. I know the Ballard years are definitely dark years that no one really likes to talk about. And you kind of were in that mess, with what does it feel like now that the organization, especially under Brandon Shanahan, has now started to build those bridges with you, with some of the other Leafs alumni? Because I know that there was some strained relationships because of how things played out with Ballard. What is it like now to know that you now have that relationship, you now have that place in Leafs in Leafs history again?
Well, it's pretty cool. I mean, I remember during the Ballard era, I mean, like he didn't want any of the ex-players around at all at the games or anything. Didn't want them anywhere near the team, which was pretty stupid, really, when you think about all the great players that played before, and he didn't want any of them around. I know when Brendan came in, that was one of the main focuses, was the history of the franchise. And for them to do that for me, I think was incredible. Damian Cox's article in the Star was very well written. And, everybody wants to forget about that era, but you can't forget that Wendell Clark played 5 years of that era.
Yeah.
Boria Salming played the entire time that Ballard was there, and other guys. So you can't just disregard that 10, 15 years or 20 years just because of the owner.
Yeah.
So Rick, on that note, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this, and then I'll also pose this question to Mike and get it from a fan's perspective who saw both eras. So when Auston was asked about the record, and he gives an answer that I thought was very profound and meant a lot to me as a fan, was you could just really tell the honor that he felt being put in the same sentences as yourself, as the other greats that have come before him in the organization. And he said, you guys have paved the way for what it means to be Maple Leafs. And I think that's something that, to me, really touched on some heartstrings there, because as fans, we always want to know that the players care. They want to know that they care about the logo as much as the fans do. So when you hear a guy like Auston, who is young relative to the average adult, anyways, he's maybe not as young in a hockey career sense, but he is a young man, to recognize the importance of the past and what it means to wear this crest, over 100-year franchise. So what does it mean to you to hear him speak about yourself in that regard? And then Mike, as a fan, I'd also like to get your point afterwards.
Well, it means a lot, really. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, just for him to come out and say that means a lot to me anyway. And I'm sure it does to the other guys that scored 50 goals and the other great Leaf players that, even before that. Now, if they could only fix our pensions, that would be great. Because, I mean, we had Al Eagleson running our Players Association, and anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm just, it was a joke, but, it's like one of the things that we always focused on when I was on the executive committee and was a player rep and so on, was we wanted to try and build something in there to get more money to the guys that played before us. Like he said, paved the way for us to be able to play at Maple Leaf Gardens and that sort of thing. And but Eagleson was always against it, and so that didn't go so well. But no, for me it was very, very good to hear that.
And Mike?
Yeah, and from my standpoint, I guess the way I look at it is the fact that I think Brendan Shanahan deserves a lot of credit here for trying to recognize the history and the significance and preserving the history, which I'm all about, as you know, as far as Maple Leaf stuff from the past and historical items from the past and significance. It's good to see them recognize that, because I think it's also imperative that the young generation, not only the fans, but the players, see this. Because think about yourself as a player. Now, Squid, you went through this yourself. You're sitting in that dressing room, you're Mitch Marner, or you're one of these other guys, William Nylander, or whoever, Morgan Riley, and you've been here for a number of years, and all of a sudden one of your teammates passes a 40-year-old record. Well, who is this guy? And you don't see him around the building. He's not even recognized. He's like, is this the way they treat their previous players? Is this what's going to happen to me down the road? God, I know in Philadelphia they do this, or in Pittsburgh they have guys here all the time. They have their own room, they have their own rink. It speaks volumes to how the team itself and the organization recognizes its players and its history. And I think Rick, He didn't tell you the story, but when he was going in one of the buildings, he ran into Alex Kerfoot and Mitch Marner. And I thought this was just a really funny story. And it just sort of exemplifies the Toronto Maple Leafs as they are today. And Rick went to go introduce himself. And Alex says, I know who you are, Rick. And he was just insulted that he was going to introduce himself and shaking his hand. And Mitch Marner sort of stood for a second. I said, did he snub you? And he went, he stood there for a second. I was saying, bring it in. And he gives him a big huge hug and hugged him. But they all knew who Rick was and what he accomplished. And they knew who Wendell Clark is, and they knew who Doug Gilmour is, and they knew Daryl Sittler and Boris Salmon and so on, Mike Palmetier. I think it's important, and it's really, really big that they do this, that the team steps up and does this. So I think what they've done with all of this, and then the team will recognize it. And I'll tell you what, it's no coincidence the team doesn't play better when they feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is that they know that, if they stay in Toronto and they contribute to the Maple Leafs and so on, that they're going to be remembered and they're going to be always talked about in Leaf history. And I think that's important for these guys to realize that, hey, they treat these guys great. I mean, Brendan came in and one of the first things he did was he took two suites on the 200 level, knocked the wall down, made it into a big one for the alumni.
Yeah, the alumni. I've heard. Yeah, the alumni box. I heard some famous stories from.
Oh, it's incredible, the food and the camaraderie. Like, I mean, you go in there any night not during the pandemic because you had to have a ticket to get in, but normally we're allowed to just walk in and go up to the box, and on any given night there'd be 7, 8 former Leafs in there, and. And then Wendell would stop by, Daryl would stop by. And I mean, it's great. I mean, it's like, it's great for us because we get to go and watch the guys play today. And it's a team that we all played a lot of years for. So, they're doing a good thing for us. And the food is exceptional. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I guess too, given how tough the Toronto market can be on some players, I think that having the alumni around does help to insulate some of that pressure away from, because then they can start picking your brains, Rick, and Wendell's brain and Darcy, like all the Leafs alumni that came before them, be like, how do I handle the media here? Or how do I handle this? Because Toronto is a monster onto its own, outside of probably like Montreal or usually the original 6 are kind of tough on their players, but Toronto has a special type of pressure. I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on, what it's like to maybe have a younger player come up to you and say, hey, I'm going through this, or how do I get through this? Or, have you had those types of conversations with any of the current players?
Well, it's kind of funny because Mike and I have talked about it a lot. Yeah. And I think it's something that probably every professional team in any league should have. Yep. As a former player, somebody who's been through some, problems of their own and issues, to be kind of like a player, I don't know what you would call it.
Confidant,
I guess, where they can make a meeting with you and they can come and talk to you without management or coaches finding out.
Yes.
And, so they could, kind of pick your brain. And it could be a simple, tiny thing, or, if it's something big and that needs to get looked after, then obviously you got to bring management in. But if it's not, you handle it on your own.
Yes.
And so they know that they have someone else that they can go talk to. And that's something that I would love to do with the Maple Leafs because, I've been through a lot in my life and my career. And, it's kind of something simple, like one of their top goal scorers hasn't scored in 8 games or something.
Yes.
And he makes an appointment. Well, meanwhile, I get all his shifts downloaded onto a computer and he comes in and we watch it together and I'll say, what do you think? And he might go, well, I don't know. I'd say, well, listen, you're getting 5 really good scoring opportunities in every single game. It's just a matter of time before it starts going in again. So it's not something I don't think you should worry about. I think you should just keep playing the same way. I mean, I would never say don't listen to your coaches, but there's just little things. And I think something like that, somebody who played the game in that market would be able to give those young guys a little bit of, I don't know what word to use, but comfort, I guess, in
Yeah.
knowing that, they're doing the right thing and don't worry about what people are saying.
Well, I know that Mike Murphy, when I chat with him, he used to tease me all the time that he was the ultimate Leafs fan and that he just adored the Maple Leafs growing up and went to all the games as a kid. And he can tell you any game. And so he was just through and through blue and white. And when he became coach of the Maple Leafs, it didn't really dawn on him as much of the impact it had on him personally until he was sitting in his office room and the door would knock and Ron Ellis would walk in. Or, somebody, or Daryl Sittler would stop by, or somebody along those lines would walk in, and some of these older guys, or Bob Nevin, or whoever it would be, Dick Duff, or one of the guys visiting the Gardens, or George Armstrong would come by and drop in and have a chat. And he realized these were the guys that I was looking up to. Now I'm representing them, standing behind the bench, and we just make them work that much harder.
Yes.
And it just gave them that little extra inspiration that they cared, and they had as much invested in this team winning from an emotional standpoint as he did being the coach. So somebody like Squid, who's been through it, who had some of his personal issues, he's the type of guy, if a player is, maybe he's been out partying a little bit too much, maybe out doing a few things and he feels his game slipping or something, you can go to him and just talk to him.
Yes.
And I know that, I don't know if you've read the book by Brent Myers. That's the guy who, it's just a very, very sad book or sad story. And he's the guy who really got bad addictions, but he ended up getting himself straight after losing everything and became that confidant for the LA Kings.
Yes.
The funny part about it is, and Denny Lombardi said, well, how do you know you're doing your job? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, if you don't hear from me, I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
That means the players are going well.
Yes.
So I mean, it's the type of thing where it's between the players and it's between this confidant or this person they can go to who's been through it. Because it's hard for these guys, some type of guy who's not played. Maybe a coach is a good coach, but he hasn't gone through the day-to-day grind that the players have gone through and been doing what they've doing. It's much better to talk to somebody who's been through what you've been through.
Yeah, Brian McGrattan does that with Calgary. He has that role with Calgary. And it's funny you mentioned stopping in, because I remember before the pandemic when, we were allowed to just walk in and go up to the box. I'd go to probably, I would go to 25 games a year. And every time I went in, I would always walk down below where the dressing room is. I'd knock on the coach's door, wish them good luck. And a lot of times if the team that was in from out of town, if I knew the coach that I played with them or, whatever, I'd just go in and say hello to them quickly and then go up to the box. So that was something that I always did when I would go to the games. And, it's important. I think it's important that they know that, hey, you have guys that played for the same organization 25, 30, 35 years ago, still are behind you and care about the team and whether they win or lose.
So I believe that the Leafs, when they talk about camaraderie, and you guys mentioned how the closeness of a team can really affect the performance, and Mike touched on this, and it really has to do with them feeling good about themselves, having a person that they can rely on that's not their coach, that doesn't necessarily affect the day-to-day outcome of their practice or their play. And I want to kind of transition this into the way that the players feel about each other in the room, and maybe direct this question first off to Rick, is that when you met these players and you got a sense of maybe the brotherhood that exists inside that room, what is your, and you've been around the game for a long time, what are some things that you look for, even though you just met him for a few brief minutes, or like you talked to Auston for 15 minutes, what's the vibe that you get about this team that really tells you that they can go on a run, or they got something that maybe special, where any team that goes on and wins, they always look like, well, we kind of had an inkling that this could be something special. Is there something that you picked up on when you met with them?
Well, I think the fact that, they're pretty close, you can tell. You just being in the practice facility for that length of time, you could see it right away that these guys were all pretty close and know each other very well. And I'll tell you a little story too. It's funny because back in the 80s, Harold Ballard, King Clancy was still alive, and we chartered everywhere, and we flew on those little prop planes, which wasn't always fun, by the way, because I didn't like flying anyway. But so anyway, that was a year that Duras, Inachek, Freecher, and forget the goalie's name from Czechoslovakia.
Yuri Sirha.
Yeah, you got it, Mike. Anyway, we're on a flight, and after our meal, which was a little thing of lasagna, the flight attendant would walk down the aisle with a wicker basket full of chocolate bars. And so we're only halfway through the season, but we always chartered and went right home, and we never stayed overnight, except when we went out to the West Coast. So anyway, King Clancy says to the flight attendant, the other old guy behind me, he can't have any because he's a diabetic. So she walks by, she stops at Harold. He puts his paw in, grabs about 4 chocolate bars. She slapped his hand, said, "You can't have any, sir. You're a diabetic." Well, the next day he canceled the charters for the rest of the year. And, but you know what? I don't think he even realized how much of an impact that made, because now we stayed overnight all the time. So we got to go out with the guys from Czechoslovakia. We got to know each other better. We got to trust each other a little bit more. And we were the 5th best team in the league in the second half. Yeah. I don't even think Harold realized that. So, but I mean, I know they do charter, but they go on road trips and they hang out together and that sort of thing. But when they're there, I mean, they got such a great facility. You know, I'm sure that a lot of times they go to practice and they're just hanging out there for hours with each other, you know. So I think having the space that they have there, I think is wonderful for the players, that they can eat together after practice and, you know, just get to know each other better.
That is encouraging to hear, because it is something that us as fans, we want to know. The magic question is, how is this team different, right? That's always what everyone's asking. So it's good to have that type of insight. And I think that, and Pat, I don't know if you have anything else before we on any other records, but I think that we can maybe transition this more to get the overarching questions about the team. I know that you guys have spoken at length about the moves that the Leafs have made and stuff like this. So I'll turn this question over to Mike first. What's your overall thoughts on the team since the deadline? Are you guys clearly Giordano has acclimated himself well. Obviously, Blackwell has stepped in and not just been a passenger on the roster. You got Lyubushkin that they added in as well. What are your overall thoughts on the team and your confidence from a fan perspective?
Well, everything starts with, I think actually the move, just to answer that question up to Anthony, is that they made some good moves at the deadline, especially with what they were dealt with and what they had to deal with. I think he did some great work, especially moving that Ritchie contract, which was a noose around their neck. I think the fact that the goaltending is obviously, when that there's nothing new coming out of this, is going to be the key for any team to win a Stanley Cup. So if Jack Campbell, who had to stand up last night, that was a good sign to take 37 shots like he did and play as well as he did in the team they should beat. But that's a good sign that he's getting his confidence back. I think the backhand has been improved greatly with Giordano back there. He gives him a steady presence in behind the blue line. He also poses as an offensive threat with this team. They love to turn the puck over and they love the defenseman to join the rush. So he does that exceptionally well. And he's a good first pass guy. I think the improved play of Timothy Liljegren, who people told us throughout the league wouldn't make it as an NHL defenseman, has been a big surprise on the positive side. Also, Lyubushkin gives them that little edge on the back end when guys are coming. You better keep your head up because you can take your head off, which is a good sign. Up front, the number one line is obviously the number one line. It's going to have to play well. John Tavares can have to play well. I'd like to see somebody a little more aggressive play with him on the one side and who he has with him. That third line, that's the anomaly, because if you had Kemp, Mikheyev, and Engvall playing well together, that could be a dynamite line. And we highlighted in our show tonight that we talked about that I think the way those three play will be how the Maple Leafs go, because they are that critical with penalty killing, the way they take the puck to the net, the way they go to the net, they're using their body and their strength and all those things you want to talk about. I think the fact that if Colin Blackwell, when he played in Tampa a couple of weeks ago, I was at the game when he was center between Simmons and Clifford. That was the most dynamic line they had all year in the fourth side, and only for one reason. And the reason is that Blackwell's so quick. He was getting into the opposing team zone quickly. He was on the puck quickly. It allowed the other two to catch up. And then inside the blue line, they're able to create turnovers, but they're able to hem the play in. Whereas before, getting into the zone late, teams were able to turn the puck over quickly. So that line became very effective. And I think if they play, I'd like to see them play together. And unfortunately, that puts Jason Spezza at risk to not being in the lineup. But unfortunately, that's the way it works. And I think, the outside of that, I like the fact, the intensity. Rick and I have talked about this a lot, about the intensity the team showing. They have this propensity to come back from down goals, but they were protecting leads well, as we've seen throughout the year also. So we like that fact because that becomes critical in the playoffs. So overall, don't want to make any crazy predictions because I don't like doing that because you never know what can happen. But listen, I like their chances of going in. I think this team is going to surprise a few people. There's lots of naysayers out there that are frowning on what they've done so far. By 108 points in the league. Well, think about the division, and they got 4 teams. One team's got 99 points. They're going to have 4 teams with 100 points. Think about when that has happened the last time in the National Hockey League. 4 really good teams. So maybe 1 or 2 of them could be out in the first round. And these are 100-point teams, and there's teams in the playoffs with a lot less points. So, we have to be prepared that something bad could happen. But the way this team, they just seem to be having that character about them that almost tells us otherwise, that they know what's at stake. They know what they have to do, and they just seem to be building on it, and they're building on it, and we like what they're seeing.
Yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Like I said too, I think the biggest thing is the first round, it's going to be a mental hurdle. It's not going to be a physical hurdle. They're good enough. They brought in 2 defensemen that I think really secure their back end and their ability to stop the cycle and that sort of thing. And I really like that. I think it's imperative come playoff time. And but it's going to be a mental hurdle. And I really believe that if they get through that mental hurdle in the first round, then the sky's the limit for this team because they've got that much talent and everybody seems to be hitting their strides right now at the most important time.
Well, the one thing I'll add, Rick, on the back end, sorry, guys, just to get in there, is everybody is pointing at Auston Matthews and the way he's played this year, and he's played exceptional. Don't forget about 16. What that kid has done this year with the puck and the way he handles the puck, he is a different player. Like, believe it or not, even though he just broke his own point total by a point the other night, he's playing at a level well above where he's ever been since he's enjoying this league. So that's the guy that I think if he brings that with him, look out.
No, oh, sorry, Anthony.
Go ahead. Go ahead, man.
I just want to drop a quick question to Mike and Rick. Mike, you had mentioned Timothy Liljegren, and as soon as you mentioned his name, Anthony kind of giggled because I've been a big proponent for Timothy Liljegren. I thought that kid, through his development, has had a lot of bad luck because of COVID. He hasn't seen a lot of game action. I think when
Mono, don't forget Mono.
He had Mono in his draft year, and then he got the concussion, I think, in his first year with the Marlies, and then some other injuries, and then COVID hit. I think he only played like 60 games in the last 3 years with the Marlies. What have you seen since his pairing with Giordano and his development that gives you hope that he might be someone that the Leafs can really rely on as the years go on?
Well, the knock on him at first was he wasn't NHL strong enough. And that's the problem you have with Nick Robinson right now, who's on the up front. He's going through the same process right now. He wasn't NHL strong enough. His outlet pass wasn't crisp enough. He was not hitting the right guy. He was weak in his own end. And he was hesitant on jumping into the play. And those are all the signs that defensemen either have or they don't have. But in his case, he's been able to overcome that. He's gotten stronger. He's been more physical. He will take a hit now. And that was one of the things that was leaning against him. So I think the fact that he's developed on this and the coaches have gained trust in him and allowed him to develop and allowed him to play, and playing with someone like Giordano, who's a backstopper, that gives him that added confidence to make that extra rush, to take that extra step in to make a pass. And he's got Giordano there directing him on the outlet pass, which I think is, remember the Leafs used to play that stretch pass all the time.
Yes.
And Rick and I used to drive us crazy when we were watching that. But what's happening now with the forwards coming back and being responsible on their own end, it gives them a better outlet. And to me, he's been a big benefactor of that. And what that allows him to do is join the play quicker. And he's also one of the first guys back. So he's, I think, learned from also watching the way Morgan Ronnie plays. So I think all those things combined, and the fact that the coaches do, again, as I said at the beginning of this, have the faith in you and trust you to play you. He knows if he makes a mistake, like a couple of weeks ago, one ended up in the back of net in overtime, he was back in lineup the next night. A year ago, he would have been sitting in the stands. So to me, I think he's that type of kid that's only going to get better. And I'll tell you, he's defying the odds because it sure didn't look like that 2 years ago.
No, for sure. And I think the addition of Labushkin and Giordano made a big difference for him too. I mean, bringing in a couple of guys, like I said, that are bigger, stronger, able to stop the cycle. But they didn't have that before. I mean, they were a smallish defense that weren't that physical. And I think that really helps him knowing that he has guys that can go out and do that. And, that he doesn't have to depend on himself to do it as much, even though he is playing that well that he can. But I just think that really helps him with his game, and the fact that, like Pat, like you said, I mean, he's hardly played in the last 3 years, and finally he's getting an opportunity and he's taking advantage of it.
That's perfect. It's great to hear about Liljegren, because I think that he's really found the right slotting. And Rick, you just touched on this with the addition of Labushkin, who's now being able to play with Riley. It really does kind of slot everyone into the right position. No one's really playing in a spot where you're like, okay, maybe they're going to be a little bit overrun there. And I just want to touch on one thing, and please forgive me if you didn't see the play, but it was at the end of the game yesterday where Labushkin took a nice little run at someone near the end of the game, and really could have got McEwen, I believe it was, and he missed him, and he gets his stick. The stick goes flying, and then he answers the bell, and he's got to fight. To me, that's something that you really haven't seen in the Leafs lineup, especially since Jake Muzzin's been out, is that kind of screw loose mentality. And I say that in the nicest way possible. Someone who really doesn't give a crap about, for lack of better words, being mean or hurting the opponent, because he really is someone that when he's looking to hit you hard. That, to me, as little as a unique play as it was, that stood out to me. Someone who's got a guy who's like, if the game's over, you're willing to still run the guy. That's something that I think is going to really help him in the playoffs. So I guess in a long-winded way, I'm trying to ask, what if Muzzin does come back healthy? He's obviously going to play, but who is that, I guess, sixth defenseman now that you guys would slot into the sixth spot to fit your pairs? Is it Labushkin? Is it Hall, Liljegren? Like, who, if you were to rank those three guys, I think my math might be off about who would fit into the lineup, but in terms of importance to the Leafs down the stretch here, how would you rank those three right-handed shot defensemen in the lineup?
Squid, you want to go first or me?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd actually rank them. I just think that the way the pairings are right now, Jake Muzzin can come in and play with anybody. That's my opinion. Sandin is going to be out for a while. May not even play in the playoffs. We don't know yet. So I just like the way they're playing right now. And I don't think Muzzin coming in, he could play with anybody. But I think all three of those guys on the right side are good. TJ Brody's also capable of playing the right side and playing well on the right side, where there's a lot of guys that can't play their offside, but he can. So if anything happens to one of those three on the right side, he could fill in. And, I just think that they got a lot more depth now on defense, that they don't have to worry so much about the pairings or where does this guy fit? Does he 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? I don't think they have to worry about that nearly as much now.
Well, my thought would be that depending on who they play.
Yeah.
If they play Boston, and right away, depending if Toronto has home ice, but if they're going to try and play an up-tempo game and turn the game over to like a speed show, then you want to keep the quick guys in there. But if you win that first game, it's going to happen in the second game. So then Labushkin has to play because that they're going to be the roller derby.
We know all about game 2s versus Boston all too well.
Well, that's right. Now, if it's Tampa, on the other hand, and you're dealing, your goals are going to be at a premium with Vasilevsky, especially if he gets hot, you're going to be a little bit more offensive, but still, their forwards are just as dangerous as anybody in the league. So again, I think it's going to be depending on life, but not skating around the question. He's got some tough questions, or tough questions to come up with some tough answers to see who stays in the lineup. But I would say right off the bat, I think Liljegren has earned a spot to play full time. And the other two, Labushkin, is getting close. And Hall has his moments where he's been good, where he's been a little bit off. and he's been bad at times too, making poor decisions. When he just sticks to his knitting, I hate that term, but when he sticks to his knitting, he's an effective player. But when he tries to do too much, the pucks end up in the back of the net.
Yeah.
To me, you probably say that about almost everybody on their defense. I think
there's a point for that, Squid. You're right.
True. I mean, if they keep it simple and if the forwards are coming back and they're able to make those 6-8 foot passes instead of, the far blue line, then they're all more effective. I think anyway.
Well, no, but one of the things like Giordano is an example. Like if things are getting pressed, instead of Hall trying to carry the puck up in, like a Giordano just ices it. Because especially if Tavares is on the ice and he knows he's been winning all his faceoffs, you know what? It's only a faceoff.
Yeah.
Dump the puck out, let him win the faceoff because he's been winning them all night. Or if it's Matthews and he's been having a hot time, or Kemp, they're hot, just win the draw, get it out, eat it, get rid of it.
Mike,
Don't try and lug it.
I've been preaching on this podcast for a very long time. Pat can vouch for me. Is that I've been all about this team recognizing the moment, right? It's something that I think that that's really hindered them from making that next step. Is that it's almost like if they could just slow down the decision in their brain, or the decision making in their brain, and really just be calm and make a play and think about the consequences of the next play. There really is the sky's the limit, and it is encouraging to hear that you both kind of think along the lines that we're thinking. Is that the depth is just making them more, correct me if I'm wrong the word, but malleable, I guess. Like they're more versatile, like you said. Like that, it really does depend on their matchup, and that's something that we've never had the luxury of before, at least in the Matthews era, right? You know what I mean? Like last year, Jake Muzzin goes down in Game 6, and like he did in the Columbus game, and you got Dermott Hall as your second pair.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
You're in trouble.
You know what? You're exactly right, and that's something that I think that that they plan for now, which is good to hear. Pat, you want to jump in here?
Yeah. I guess before we run out this final podcast, I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on. It's starting to look obviously a Tampa Boston kind of first round matchup. If you had to pick your poison, gentlemen, who would you rather have in the first round, Boston or Tampa?
Yeah, well, we already talked about this today, Mike and I, but I prefer Boston personally because first of all, they're going to come out and they're going to play aggressive. And the Leafs are going to take advantage of that, especially if they take penalties. If their power play gets hot again, which it probably could in the playoffs and probably will, then I mean they've beaten Boston this year. Tampa, they've beaten them too. But with Vasilevsky back there and a team that has won back-to-back Stanley Cups and know what they need to do in the playoffs, that's not the team I want to play. I want to play Boston. And not only the back-to-back Cup champions, but they probably got one of the smartest coaches in the league, in Cooper. Whereas and I'm not a knock against Bruins or their coach, but I just think they're better suited to beat them than they would beat Tampa.
Yeah, I concur with that as well because Tampa. I don't know. We don't know whether they're playing possum right now. The way they're playing,
I think they're a sleeping giant right now, personally,
because they know that if they exert themselves, they may slip it. They can't catch the Leafs at second. Why exert themselves? They're playing as good as they have to play. They know they have another gear in them. They know they have that backstop in the barrel. You just wonder, or has the time come that they have run out of legs and the gas is coming out of the tank? But so on all of those things, that they're not skating around it. If I had my preference, I would say the Bruins because the Bruins skill-wise don't match up to Toronto. Goaltending-wise, I don't think you could at best will give them equal.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Toronto has the edge right there. And the fact, as Rick mentioned already, if they come out and start the roller derby hockey again, if Toronto's power play is on like it has been most of the year, then bring it on because they'll just fill the net. And then that's when if you get Lyubushkin in the lineup, and if they go to that fourth line with Blackwell, Clifford, and Simmons, and know they can't get away with the nonsense, and had these guys running the light-footed play, they want to play like idiots, let them because they'll be looking from the stands not too quickly.
Yeah, they don't have the depth that the Leafs have either up front or on defense,
no.
But Tampa does.
And, Tampa
sure does.
They have the depth and they could compete. And if a player goes down, they're not going to worry too much about it. Whereas Boston doesn't have that depth that the Leafs do, or Tampa or Florida. And I think that's the biggest thing right now is the depth that, like you say, the chances of somebody not getting hurt in the playoffs is probably slim. Somebody's going to go down at some point. So when they do, the Leafs have that depth, and I don't think Boston does, but Tampa and Florida do.
The Bruins are already dealing with it a little bit. I've noticed, I've been following on Twitter, they got Lindholm who's battling. He didn't try. William Pasternak has been playing recently. Bergeron is taking some days off, I believe. Yeah. I think he's like, I don't even think he's practicing. I think he's just been playing games.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to be dealing with it right now. And you both make great points. But
it's like I said to Mike earlier today, Anthony, I said, at this point in time in the season, there isn't a player in the league that isn't.
That's right.
There's nobody's 100%. I mean, going into the playoffs, you'd be shocked to see how many guys are not even close to 100%, dealing with certain little injuries that they're going to play through, and they're going to be fine. But I'll tell you, you're hurting when you get to this point in the year.
Yeah, I'm sure the trainers' table is getting sat on quite a lot on off days and on game days. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's good it's great to hear the inside perspective. But Mike, you're also offering some very level-headed takes for myself, who can sometimes run. My takes can run amok. You really talked me off the ledge with the Justin Hall, even though you were a little bit critical of him. He gets me a little bit emotional. I always say he's bad for my blood pressure, and I'm too young to have those types of problems. So,
well, you can never have enough big bodies back there, Anthony, in playoff time, especially when goals are at a premium. Yeah. And he's a big body, and he will block shots, and he does surprise sometimes on the offensive side and moves the puck forward. So you can never ignore that.
Oh, that's for sure.
I don't mind Hall back there. I mean, he came in as kind of an unheralded. He played with Dermott with the Marlies, and all the talk was about Dermott. But like Mike said, he's a big body, another guy that can stop the cycle down low, that's capable of doing that. If he just keeps everything simple, he's going to be fine. Once he tries to do a little bit too much, that's when things go afoul.
And the other thing, boys, he gets the puck to the net. That's the one thing that Hall does well. He gets to the puck to the net, and that's very critical at this time of the year.
Yeah, the Leafs will definitely be looking for some additional scoring, so hopefully they can start getting it from the defense, because Morgan Rielly's been lights out. Liljegren has gotten, I think, 4 goals in the last month or so. He's found his shot. But I have one final question. I know Anthony's going to laugh at this because we've had offline chats about the refereeing in the playoffs. I've asked you both, Rick and Mike, offline. I'd like to get your thoughts and have our listeners get your thoughts on the intangibles, which is the refereeing in the playoffs. I know I've never coached, never played professional hockey, but I noticed that the games are ref differently in the playoffs. What are your thoughts? Is it just me as a casual fan? It can't be me in the blue and white goggles. The referees do change the way they officiate the games, right, gentlemen?
Well, I would agree with you. I would say if anybody thinks that they referee the same way in the playoffs, or if a referee says, no, we call the same game in the playoffs, I'd say they're full of shit, personally, because it does change. Now, I wouldn't say that it changes in a way that they ref for one team or the other. I just think they just call a lot less when it comes playoff time. And you're going to see, like we did last year when they played Montreal, a lot of cross-checking in front of the net and that sort of thing that they let go. And that's just how the playoffs are refereed, because the referees, and each round, they let more go. So when you get to the Stanley Cup Finals, it's kind of like they don't want to be the ones that dictate who wins or who loses in the playoffs. And if that means calling less penalties and letting a little bit more go, I mean, I played when the regular season was like that. So, it's kind of, it's not right, but it's just a fact that that's the way it is.
Well, yeah, and you're right, Squid. And unfortunately, the referees, just same as the players. And here's the sort of the business side of it, if you will. The players are on watch to see how they perform under pressure when the marbles are all on the line. Well, so are the referees, because the premium jobs, which is the Stanley Cup final and the playoffs, go to the premium referees. So they're on watch too. And they don't want to be that guy that made the decision to cost somebody a Stanley Cup, like a foot in the crease or whatever it could be. So to Rick's point, they do let a little bit go at times, but I think they do get intimidated by the buildings. And it always seems to be Wine Boston. And I've had this conversation with Squid before. They tried to take hitting from behind out of the game. And in 2013 with a 3-goal lead, everybody forgets that Lucic ran Gunnarsson from the red circle dot to the end boards and plastered his face. It's a 5-minute major all year with a game suspension. He comes off the boards, passes in front of net, and they score. And then the Leafs cave in. Like, how is that not a penalty during the regular season, but in the playoffs, it's not. And the crowd is going crazy. And this nonsense goes on all the time. And last year, I thought I was at a Toronto Rock game.
You know what?
The cross-checking going on.
Mike?
And it was just crazy. And I know I sound like a Leaf fan.
You got to live with it, Michael.
But Squid, you're absolutely. But having said all that, you're right. You know what? We got to deal with it. It's coming, and it's going to come.
Yeah.
And you know what? I believe that the Leafs right now are more suited to deal with that in the playoffs.
Agreed.
I really believe that they have a lot more depth and everything, but I think they're ready that they can deal with that kind of stuff in the playoffs.
Yep.
And
Agreed.
don't forget, their special teams are in the top 5 in the National Hockey League, both of them. So, when you have top 5 penalty killing and top 5 power play, then you're ready for the playoffs.
Agreed.
Yeah. It really is it's something to behold when you watch with that first week. You know what I mean? And I really do think it's the best playoff in all of professional sports.
Oh,
because
no question.
The atmosphere, the crowd. Thank the Lord that the crowd is going to be back for these playoffs.
Yes.
Because oh wow, like I am very excited for that.
Yeah.
You feel the intensity around the city. They got the fan fest outside the arena back again. So it really is going to change the environment. And I completely agree. This year, I think that they are ready for it. They got the personnel to do it. I think they have the attitude, like Mike and Rick mentioned, the business-like mentality. Nothing bothered. I think the only time I've heard them complain about the refs in a more public sense is the Matthews game, that Arizona play in overtime, I believe. That was the only one where I've seen any Leaf complain to a ref about a call in the media or that got any coverage. So it seems like they're prepared for it. It's almost like adapt or die at this point, right? With regards to the refereeing. So
it's kind of funny because the press talk about it all the time, but you don't hear the players talking about it. You don't hear the coaches talking about it. I like that. I like the fact that the players and the coaches are not talking about it.
No excuses.
But the fans do, the press does. But as long as they're not worried about it, then I think they're going to be fine.
Yep.
And Rick, just sorry, I know we Pat called last question, but I just thought of this now because it's more recent in my head. I read it on Twitter before the game yesterday. Is that the Leafs? But the media did cover it. Is that it seems like the Leafs are making more of an effort to know the refs by name. Now, is that something that and Tavares said just to try and be a little bit more professional out there or something along those lines. Now, is that something that you think is that could work in their favor if you kind of build that, I guess, professional relationship with the refs and you know their names and you know maybe the way that they're calling games? It's almost like they have a whole analytics department
on the refs.
Not on the refs. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not just the opponents.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, things have changed quite a bit. When I played, the referees, we knew them all. We'd see them in the bar and we'd buy them a beer and, we'd talk to them and they would always have a conversation with you on the ice. And that's kind of changed where the referees don't want to get into much of a conversation. So I think the fact that is a good thing, because if they get to know them and talk to them properly and don't call them names and everything else, then you know what? Referees are human. They're human beings that are doing a very difficult job. And if you piss them off, they're going to make calls. I don't care what anybody says.
Hey, or you could be a Blue Jay fan and have that mutt that was umping the game last week. Remember that one?
My God, that was awful.
Oh yeah.
It was like 76 pitches, whatever, outside the zone, and he called them strikes or whatever the stupid number was. It was so we could have that. So think we at least don't have to deal with those idiots.
Yeah.
You're right. They got those something on Twitter. They got those
27 calls.
27 calls.
One was the first pitch of the game was right on the corner of the plate, and he called the ball, and then he missed 26 more calls after that. And I saw a couple of them that were literally 4 inches outside, and he called it a strike.
Well, when do you hear Dan Shulman complain? He complained for like 3 innings, like going on. Well, it's the only sport where the umpires think 40,000 people go to watch them ump.
Yeah,
you're right. It's almost like they're there to make a show of it as soon as the manager starts giving them the business. I've never seen Montoyo that pissed off before.
That's exactly right. That was the first, Anthony. You're absolutely right about that. And hopefully that's the last time we see it this year.
Getting back to the refs, though, I mean, I've asked Kevin McGuire, who went from being a player to an NHL referee, and he said, Squid, he said, being a player is a hell of a lot easier than being a referee. Trust me. I believe him. I mean, I don't think I'd want to be a referee at that level because, everything is, I don't know, and especially in the playoffs, everything is so amplified that if you make one bad call, everybody's all over you.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can say I can be a ref. If you say, oh, I could step in and be an NHL referee, I don't think people realize how much physical training they go through to those training camps. You hear all about it, the combines that they run. They really are physically built for this, especially if you got to step into a fight between Tom Wilson and Ryan Reeves, for example. But I think at the end of the day, people just want the consistency. You know what I mean? It's almost like if they indicate early on, okay, this is the way we're calling it, the players will adapt. And Rick, you could probably speak to this even more. Is if you know how the game's going to be called, the parameters that you're working in. You know what I mean? I think where they get frustrated, and especially as a fan, is that something's going one way and they're not making the same call the other way. You know what I mean? So it's all in all.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you on that. I mean, but you know what? I'll be honest with you. I don't watch too many hockey games where I see one team getting called for infractions and they're not calling it against the other team. I know the press and everybody would make you believe that, but I mean, if you look at it at the end of every game, pretty much, there might be a difference in 2 penalties from one team to the other.
That's right.
Now, my only beef on that is if you're the dominant team and you're in the other team's end most of the game and you're dominating the game, it probably should be more like 4 or 5 different, but again, they're doing their job and they're not perfect. And we got to remember that they're human beings and they're not perfect. And, sometimes they don't see it, it's just the way it is. And not like an umpire in baseball where he clearly sees that the ball is 4 inches outside, but he calls it a strike. Like,
well, to show you who's boss.
Yeah.
So speaking of who's boss, I would like to get your thoughts because we've now have seen Sheldon Keefe now over the last 3 seasons kind of grow as a coach. We're starting to see the difference with his 2 assistant coaches. Rick, you mentioned the special teams have just been phenomenal this year. What have you seen in Sheldon Keefe that gives you confidence that he'll be able to take this team to the next level in this year's playoffs?
I see a big difference in his calmness. I mean, I'm watching that, I can't remember what the name of it was on Netflix.
All or Nothing.
All or Nothing.
Yeah.
And before the 7th game at home, he was, yelling and screaming about wanting the players to be, I want guys that want to be great and everything and stuff. Whereas that was a moment where I think you go, guys, we played all year for this. You know, take a couple of deep breaths and go out and be the best you can, and just, you know, go out and do your job, and we won't have any problems. Right now, like when I was there that day and he's going through stuff on the videos and all that, he was so calm. And I thought that was great, you know, because you need a calmness in the room when you get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, if you're looking for some of your leadership, you look to the guy who's leading the ship, and that is your coach usually. And if he's standing there, like last year, if you recall in the playoffs, I was watching him at times, and Squid and I talked about this. He had the notebook in his hand, and he kept going his head. He kept looking all the time, like, who's there? I said, okay, well, you played this team 10 times. You've now played them 4 times in the playoffs. That's 14 times. Surely the guy didn't know who's on the roster and who's coming on the ice. But he looked confused.
Yeah.
But as Squid is pointing out, this year, he's got a calmness about him. He almost becomes more critical when they win than when they lose. So he never lets the players get too high or get too low, and he does the same thing with himself. So his body chemistry and his body language have both come down a couple decimal points. And he realizes, I've got a good hockey club. If these guys perform to the way they can, we can have some success. Not who knows what that means, but we will win more than we lose. And so far this year, they've done that. They've won 51 games, and look what they're doing. So to me, I think that's been a real key, because you look behind the ball, that's Squid. You look behind the bench, you got a coach looking up and down and shaking his head all around, doesn't know what's going on. And I've played and looked at guys doing that. They go, well, this guy doesn't know what's going on. Like, how can I trust what he's going to say?
Yeah. Well, you know what? And that day I got to spend down there for several hours at the practice facility, and I saw Sheldon for quite a while. I sat with him a little bit during lunch as well. And I see a real big calmness in him this year that I didn't see last year. And I think that bodes exceptionally well for the team going forward. You got to have a level-headed calmness behind the bench, because if the guy behind the bench who is your leader, like Mike said, is not calm, then the players are going to follow that lead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and so
exactly.
I mean, they're going to follow the other way too. If he's calm and hey, it's not a big deal, guys. We're fine here. We're okay. Then that's the way the players are going to be.
Rick, you hit the nail on the head there with that speech that you mentioned, because I thought I completely agree. I just one quick addition to that. I believe it was the overtime before Game 6. It wasn't before Game 7 that he did that famous speech where he kind of reamed out the Matthews line. Is that the one that you're referring to?
Well, no, I thought it was Game 7 when he just said, I want guys that want to be great, that want to be known as great players. And all that. I think that was before Game 7.
Yeah, it almost looked like it wasted that bullet almost. But you know what I mean? Maybe the team didn't need.
You know, at that moment, and I mean, I coached for 7 years in the minors, and we won a championship in South Carolina in the ECHL when I was there. And you know what? I was always calm. I don't know what it was. It's not my character to be calm, but knowing that they're following me and I got to be calm for them was the way I coached. And when I saw that, it was just stuck out to me that this is not the time to be raising your voice and saying, I want guys that want to be great, known as great and everything. It's time to take a breath, deep breath, relax. We played all year for this. Go out, everybody do your best, and we'll come in winners. And I think that's, you know, but I see this year, I see a lot of calmness in him. And I think he learned a lot from last year.
Well, the other thing too, you have to keep in mind, listen, there's only so much a coach can do. And it's like any good business. If you have a good business plan and you lay the business plan out so that everybody can understand it, and this is all your employees and all your executives, and everybody is given their role and they know what their role is, at some point they have to be accountable. And same as this, if he's prepared and he's confident that he's prepared this team and has done the analytical work with the opposing team they're looking at and with the coaches and prepared the team, the players have to be accountable at some point. And then that brings that calmness to the coach, knowing, listen, we've done what we can. I mean, this is not by Mike Babcock pulling a, Dudley Do-Right saying I had my man and, you guys weren't prepared.
Yeah.
It's just the way he delivers it.
Yeah.
Babcock wasn't wrong, but just he had a different approach about doing it. Whereas this way, he's got that calmness about him, probably because he's a little closer in age to them. So they have that little bit more reliability in what he's delivering them and more acceptability with it.
So this, gentlemen, it has been another fun conversation with you both. I guess before we wrap this up, where can our listeners find your podcast? What other projects are you guys currently working on that maybe our listeners and our followers can kind of, catch on and help support you guys?
Well, we got, I'll go first here, Squid. We got the Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan podcast, which comes out every Friday at 6:00. This week, well, hopefully you listen to it, we got Ryan Whitney from Spit and Chicklets on. He's absolutely hilarious and a great guy and a good guy. We also do a Leaf Talk on Wednesdays at 6:00 on Facebook Live, so you can join us there. We talk about Maple Leafs, and Rick gives us insights as a former player moving forward and scoring goals and playoffs and all that kind of stuff moving forward. So that's every Wednesday. I'm now a registered certified appraiser, so I'm doing sports appraisals for people who need it for insurance purposes or sales or for that dreaded word divorce or estate sales. You can contact me at Ultimate Leafs Fan or at the Ultimate Appraiser. .com. And the last thing I'm doing is where I could use some help from some of your listeners. I'm writing a book on beer league hockey. And I'm doing comparisons like the similarities of beer league hockey players from the time you're 20 to the time you're 65, the puck hog, the guy who won't come off the ice, the dreaded 11th forward, the cheapskate, the guy who borrows all the equipment, all those type of things, along with many, many, many stories. So I've been working on that for a number of months now. But the big thing about it is, and why I want people, if you could send me at my, Mike at ultimateleafsfan.com or our Squid at the Ultimate Leaf Fan, send it to us. But what I'm going to do is all the proceeds from the book are going to Ronald McDonald House in Markham. And so it's going to go to a charity cause. So share me your funny stories, like anything that crazy happened. And I'm happy to put them on there. And I've had some doozies from guys right across. So reach out to me and send me your story and, maybe I'll use it.
Well, maybe hopefully this weekend when I play shooting and I play in the tournament, I'll have some stories for you, Mike. But no, I'm kind of just doing the same thing I've done for a long time, and appearances and playing alumni games and tournaments for charity, that sort of thing. I'll probably be playing a lot of golf tournaments this summer, and trying to talk Mike into both of us putting a group together to buy an ECHL team and get involved into the game and have some fun with it. And
we got some ideas.
Yeah. So we're gonna kind of look into it. I'm gonna check. My son's still playing in the ECHL in Cincinnati, so maybe I can get him to get his general manager to give us a good outline as to what the costs are and everything. And who knows? We might be owners one day and having fun doing it. And well, I know we'll have fun.
Oh yeah.
We got some ideas, yeah.
As long as we're making money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And winning.
Yeah, that's the important piece, right?
Well, I think those two kind of go together, don't they?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. That works. That works.
So, John, this has been a wonderful, wonderful chat with you guys again. Hope to have you guys back on soon. And hopefully, we'll be sitting together on the Leafs parade line in the summer. But in the meantime, enjoy yourselves, enjoy the games, and we hope to have you guys back on very shortly.
Yeah,
Anytime,
well,
Pat and Anthony, always a pleasure.
And I won't be standing on the side. I'm going to jump on one of the cars.
Oh yeah. Rick, I'll be throwing you some what do you those things? Those
confetti
towels or whatever. The confetti.
Oh, the terror towel. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure we'll see you on TV at one point throwing something off what do they call it? The floats or whatever they.
The floats,
yeah.
I totally botched the line, but whatever. I mean, that's how.
We knew you meant, Anthony.
That's how excited I am for it.
Thanks, guys.
Anyways, it was great.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, fellas.